The first item then is item 1, the report of the Chief Executive on the procedures for the roll of honour. Now, at the last meeting, at the conclusion, we had agreed the procedures, and we were moving on then to the specifics of persons to be named to be taken from the roll of the Freedom of the City. So we're still on the item. Now, I have received an amendment in the name of Councillor Michael Mullooly and Councillor David Costello to the procedure. So I'm going to allow, it's from the Fianna Fáil group, so I'm going to allow them to come in on that initially. Councillor Heaney, are you indicating?
Apologies, Lord Mayor. Could I ask that my name be added to that motion? Thank you.
Yes. Do we have a speaker? Are you speaking, Councillor Mullooly? Yeah.
Do you wish me to speak on the substantive part of the motion, the substantive part of the amendment?
Well, you put forward the amendment, yes. So it's the amendment we're dealing with first.
The purpose and the intention of this amendment is not to stymie what will come later, or the proposal to rescind or revoke the freedom of the city to a named person at a later stage. The intention of this motion is to put in place a robust procedure, a procedure that will carry us forward, a procedure when this matter arises again, as it almost certainly will at some stage, that we have in place a robust procedure. And what I propose, or the amendment I propose, is, given the serious implications of rescinding stroke revoking the award of Freedom of the City of Dublin, no recipient of this award shall be removed from the roll of honour unless he requests removal, or otherwise by majority of 2/3 of the members of Dublin City Council. It does set the bar higher. It does make it more difficult to remove or rescind the award of Freedom of the City, but in my view, it's a more robust procedure. A 2/3 majority is fairer because we have already given that person the freedom of the city. We have already made a decision, and we shouldn't lightly take away that freedom of the city or that award from that person. It also gives us a moral authority, a stronger moral authority. We send a stronger message in relation to the conduct we disapprove of by that particular member. In putting forward this motion, I'm reminded of the only time it happened before. It happened in circumstances where somebody was removed because of their nationality. That seems an unfair way of doing things, and thankfully that travesty was rescinded. A 2/3 majority would avoid such a travesty, and I commend it to the members of Dublin City Council.
Councillor Flynn.
Yeah, I think the amendment is very kind of wordy, and it has a very good principle. However, I do believe that this amendment should be placed before the Protocol Committee, where we would have a very strong discussion in relation to the procedures of removing the honour of the freedom of the city, and also how an individual goes about handing in their scroll if they wish to actually give it back to Dublin City Council, because that's an area also which lacks a particular protocol if an individual wishes to hand it back. I don't really think that this particular amendment should be discussed at this particular meeting. I do believe it has, great merit. I think it should go before the Protocol Committee, where we can have a really, really strong discussion around it, and then we can actually recommend to the City Council in full discussion as to what we should do, and I think that would be the appropriate way to deal with it. But I don't want it to get in the way of the business that's before us at the moment, but I really do believe that it should go before the Protocol Committee. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Heaney.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I'd like to second the proposal that two-thirds majority would be, I suppose, set in stone before we remove the bestowing of the freedom of the city on any individual, for the very reasons given by the proposer, Lord Mayor, but also because of the fact that, bar one decision to award the freedom of the city on an individual, all of the awards that I have been involved in have been unanimous, proposed by the Lord Mayor of the day with the unanimous approval of the City Council. And in circumstances where the unanimous approval is was given in the case of all of the individuals bar one since I've been on this City Council, Lord Mayor, I second the proposal. As far as the proposal by the previous speaker to refer the matter to the Protocol Committee, I think at this stage the amount of matters that have been sidetracked to the Protocol Committee is really getting to be a little bit voluminous at this stage, Lord Mayor. I think this City Council chamber ought to make a decision on this very worthwhile proposal. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Okay, I have Councillor Hand.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. I'm going to speak on this amendment and on the substantive proposal later on when we're dealing with that. But just on this amendment, I find it somewhat, regarding what the previous councillor said, Councillor Heaney said that Lord Mayor proposes a person for freedom of the city and they're elected unanimously. Well, that isn't the case. If we look back last year, Barack Obama was awarded the freedom of the city with about 55% of the councillors supporting, which wasn't unanimous. About 45% of the councillors in this chamber were against that warmonger getting the freedom of the city, and I think we shouldn't allow this warmonger have her name on the roll of freedom of the city either. What's happening in Rakhine State in Burma is nothing. At best it's apartheid, at worst it's genocide, and I think we need to remove her from the role of the freedom of the city. And just, I don't think it's in the standing orders that it's two-thirds. So, you know, is this amendment in order? Obviously, it can be up to us as councillors, but should it not be deferred to the Protocol Committee rather than heard here? And obviously, this will be a straight majority vote, and then if that fails, we can then have a straight majority vote to remove Aung San Suu Kyi from the freedom of the city. And I find it bizarre that Fianna Fáil are proposing this, considering their support of PESCO, the military alliance of the EU. They've shifted so far to the right in terms of international affairs that the likes of Frank Aiken would be spinning in his grave. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Councillor McCann.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, I disagree with the proposal that this should be removed to protocol, because the first item on the agenda is procedures for deletions from the roll of honour of Dublin City Council. We should take the decision to vote on this amendment tonight. And like I have to say, I'm won over by the argument put forward by Councillor Mullooly. This is an extraordinary decision to revoke the freedom of the city on a recipient, and on that basis there should be an extraordinary vote of council, and therefore I believe that it should be in a supermajority. So I'm happy to support the amendment. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor McAuliffe.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, as somebody who intends to vote to remove Aung San Suu Kyi, I believe that this amendment actually will give some comfort to those people who fear that we will face into a procedure where we will be constantly removing people from the roll of honour. Awards are made in their time, and they're decided on by the council, often, as it is said, often unanimously. I believe that a two-thirds majority is a high threshold, and I will state later why I believe it's appropriate to remove Aung San Suu Kyi for that reason. But I would commend Councillor Mullooly. I believe it is a way of ensuring that we don't get into some sort of ongoing process where people are removed. And there's many other people on there now that you look back with the distance of time or the distance of the makeup of this chamber, and there might be an argument for people to be removed. I don't think anybody in this chamber wants to see us drag ourselves through a procedure where that happens every month when we're trying to solve other issues in the city. So I agree with the motion to amend it to two-thirds.
Councillor Perry.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I think this amendment should have went to protocol. I've no problem with the arguments behind the amendment, but in this case what we have is an ongoing, daily, systematic rape, torture and murder of the Rohingya people by the government of Burma. This has to be addressed tonight, under the current protocols. If Fianna Fáil want to change the protocol, let them take it to the protocol committee, and I for one will support them. I am very suspicious about this amendment being put here at this late stage and to be, I assume, supported by Fine Gael. It looks to me if there's an attempt to either delay or negate the whole process of removing this from this person who is certainly complicit in ethnic cleansing, possibly supportive of. So I'd ask people to vote against this amendment and take the vote on this as per our normal procedure. Good.
Councillor McGrattan.
I understood we already voted on the procedures at the last meeting. I know it got a bit messy towards the end of the meeting, but I understood we had already voted, and the vote was put. And you look at the webcast, it was proposed, it was put, it was agreed how we proceed. You then said, you then asked about a specific person, and it was felt that we shouldn't do that. So, as far as I'm concerned, we've already agreed the procedures of how we do things. I think we need to decouple. I know there's a person's name coming up, but agreeing procedures to me is a separate item. We shouldn't do that with the person involved. You don't need a 2/3 majority to get onto the list, so I don't see why you should have to have it off. We have in standing orders a robust way of rescinding motions, i.e. it's half of the council, not the members present, it's half of the council. So I don't think we should have certain rules for rescinding one motion, certain rules. We have it already in standing orders. Leave it as it is. This is agreed. Let's get on with the business that's on hand. Thanks.
Councillor McCartan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I will not speak on the substantive issue until later, but may I certainly say there's no conspiracy between Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. This is the first we saw of this amendment. I think it has merit. I think it's very important. Of course we are going to address the issue this evening, but it does raise the threshold. This is an exceptional item, and I would be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, if members agree... Sorry, can I speak, please, Councillor? Okay, I have a list of speakers here, Councillor Friel. Now, what I was going to suggest, it's up to members, as there is a proposal to refer the amendment, and only the amendment, to the Protocol Committee, proposed by Councillor Flynn. Is there a seconder for it? Seconded by Councillor Perry. If the Council agrees, we could take the vote on that now, and if it is agreed to refer it.
The amount of issues that are coming to the Protocol Committee because people want to fast track or slow down their issues.
Councillor
This
Heaney,
is a simple issue on a point of information. Heaney, can we just take
you're arguing. Sorry, you're arguing the point that it's open to members to propose. I'm only suggesting that in order to save duplication, that we take that. If people want to continue the debate and not refer it to the Protocol Committee, well then that's fine. The vote will be taken. So I'm proposing that we put that motion, that it be referred to the Protocol Committee to a vote. Councillor Malooly.
With the greatest respect, Lord Mayor, I proposed the motion, I spoke on the motion is put. I would like to see it to a finish and a vote taken on the motion.
Even if that delays the motion. And I've seconded.
Councillor McGrattan.
Lord Mayor, I repeat, in my view, the motion is out of order because the procedures have already been agreed. So you can't amend something that has been agreed by the Council. So the only place you can put the motion is the protocol because we've already agreed this.
Lord Mayor, as a point of information, I take Councillor McGattan's point, but why was the motion taken then if it had already... Once the amendment is put, it is put, and we should vote on it.
Well, look, that is the case. The amendment has been put, but it's also open to the Council to refer it if they wish. So, well, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue with the list of speakers. It'll be open to the Council at the end of this section of the debate to either refer it or to vote yea or nay. Is that okay?
Could I get a point of clarification, Lord Mayor?
Yes.
If we vote in favour of the amendment, will that delay us taking a vote on Aung San?
No, no.
I was asking the Lord Mayor, by the way. So.
No. No. Okay, Councillor O'Brien.
Well, I indicated to speak when Councillor Heaney was halfway through our contribution, making the claim about all past awards being unanimous, but which was then subsequently corrected. Only after I interjected behind you, and then. No, she didn't. Anyway, no.
Sorry, Councillor, can you just continue without interruption, please?
That's okay. We're quits now. We barracked each other now in the course of our contributions tonight. But Councillor Hand made the. There you go. Anyway, I think the point was adequately addressed by Councillor Hand about the Barack Obama fiasco last year. Just in terms of the substantive motion itself, I really am convinced about the principle of two-thirds majorities, and in a sense it privileges past councils, and then according as political compositions of councils, this council change in the years and decades to come. Like, I don't want future councils to be bound by, councils that were dominated by some of the establishment parties here, and then them to have a freer hand, to do what's necessary to change decisions that were made. Thanks.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Vera. I want to back this going to protocol, and one of the reasons being is, and I understand the motion and that you're looking for 2/3 to rescind, but we don't need 2/3 to award the Freedom City. And I know it's been done many a times unanimously, but as the example has been given about Barack Obama, that wasn't done with a 2/3 majority. So for us to enforce protocol that 2/3 to rescind, we should also do it for 2/3 should be in favour of awarding the particular award. So because that's not dealt with in this motion, and that I think it involves a bigger and longer debate, I would like to see this go to protocol, and let's do it, and we're going to do it properly.
Councillor Kennedy.
I've spoken in glowing terms of Councillor Hand in this chamber before, so this isn't a personal criticism, but I think he's doing an injustice to the proponent of the motion by questioning the motives, and he's doing a severe injustice to Councillor Heaney when he pointed out President Obama had been the subject of a disputed grant when that had been acknowledged expressly by Councillor Heaney. And I think Councillor Perry was grossly unfair when he said that he smells a plot to delay or negate the revocation of the freedom of the city tonight by some form of political conspiracy. He ignored Councillor McAuliffe, who said he will vote to revoke the freedom of the city no matter what the outcome of this proposal is. As, may I say, will I. I have made that decision. I will vote to revoke the freedom of the city, whether or not it is done on a majority basis or a 2/3 basis. But I think there is abundant sense in what Councillor Malooly has proposed. The idea that you have something that has been granted on every occasion in its history, with the exception of one, on a unanimous basis, not just a supermajority basis, including when it was granted to the recipient who is the subject of the debate tonight. She received the freedom of the city unanimously. I believe it should be revoked, but I also believe that it should be revoked on a 2/3 basis. Councillor McGrattan expressed some concern about the procedural legitimacy of it being before the Council tonight. That has been resolved. It is before us tonight. It has been acknowledged by the Ord Vera that whether we vote in favour or against the 2/3 proposal, we will vote tonight on whether or not it should be revoked from the current recipient. The subject of this discussion, you have a bizarre situation where there are plenty of people saying, yes, it should go to protocol, but I'm happy for it to be taken back from someone tonight on a majority basis, which is just totally inconsistent and borders on hypocrisy. And you've had the chair of the protocol committee say that that committee is flooded with work, so this is something that should be decided by the Council tonight.
Councillor McVeigh.
I just had a question about the procedure, but it's been answered. Thanks. I'm going to be coming back in on the substantive motion later, yeah?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I had an amendment to the amendment which I want to withdraw because it only delayed even further, and I don't want to do that. But I do think I'm going to vote to rescind the freedom of the city this evening and the substantive motion. But I do believe 2/3 is a good way of going about it, and I'll tell you why. The People of Dublin Award the freedom of the city to the recipients. And the people of Dublin need to know that if that's been rescinded, that the vast majority of this council are united in thinking that way. And I think that's something that, if we were able to pass this amendment here this evening, I think it could comfortably be passed by 2/3, by the way. That's my own view from speaking to people, so I don't think that's the debate. But I think that the people of Dublin will be much more comfortable knowing that when they do give an award to someone, that the vast majority of the people who they've elected will have to rescind that if further down the road. So I would ask people to vote for this amendment and then vote with their conscience in the substantive motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Friel.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. As the Lord Mayor that gave the freedom of the city to Aung San Suu Kyi in good faith at the time, and I was supported by the members of the council at that time, and there were different circumstances, and things have changed certainly very dramatically. Like Councillor Carr, I think you probably will get 2/3 tonight, but certainly it's normal if you want to overturn something that you actually go for 2/3. It's kind of a double lock. It shows that we're not doing something on a whim. And the point is that this is the business of this council. Why kick it down the road to a committee that's already overworked? So, I mean, why not be decisive, make a decision here this evening, because it is the business of every member of this council, and why not take the vote here? So I strongly support Councillor Malouly's proposal. I think it is right that we go for 2/3 majority. It strengthens the decision, if nothing else. And I think it is the right thing to do.
Councillor Costello.
I just want to make something clear. I agree with the 2/3 majority thing. I am voting to rescind freedom of the city tonight as well. And I just hope that reassures anybody there. I think the vast majority of the Fianna Fáil group are voting to rescind tonight, and I can give you that commitment from myself. And there's no conspiracy in it. And that's speaking straight to you. Like, you know, there is no conspiracy. I'm voting to rescind this thing. The 2/3 majority is a sensible thing. I think it's a very straightforward thing. You're either for it or you're not. I don't think sending the protocol is going to change anybody's mind. It's just going to delay it. And if we have another protocol in 2 months' time, or another rescindment in 2 months' time, we'll be voting with the majority. And you know, it just makes sense to deal with it now, and it's such a straightforward thing to change. But there is no conspiracy, and there is no anyway. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Okay, right. Just a quick comment, just to remind members that part of the reason for the confusion, slight confusion in relation to procedure, was that unfortunately members did vote to adjourn the meeting and not to carry on for half an hour, which meant that we broke in the middle of this item, which inevitably led to some confusion. Okay, we have a proposal to refer this to the Protocol Committee, so I would propose to take that first. If that's passed, obviously it goes to that committee. If not, then we proceed with the vote on the amendment itself. So, Deirdre.
On a point of order, Lord Mayor, doesn't it make much more sense to vote on the amendment first,
yeah,
and then if it fails, vote to send it to protocol?
Yeah.
On a point of information, if it fails, it fails. There's no point in sending it to the Protocol Committee if it fails.
No, I mean, I disagree, Councillor Binchy. The proposal is to refer this proposed amendment to the Protocol Committee.
Lord Vera, on a point of order, can you confirm whether or not you've received advice from the officials to the contrary effect, saying that in fact it would be better to proceed as Councillor Binchy has stated?
No, I haven't received such advice. I mean, in all my experience, I've never seen a case where you're asked to defer or refer something to a committee, and you don't do that first before you vote on the substantive item. Councillor McGrattan, is there a point of order?
It's a question on the amendment, so I don't know if you want to put the deferral question first or take it now. I'm not sure.
Okay, I'm putting the question as to whether we refer it to the Protocol Committee.
Ardvara, can I just ask a question for clarity? Just for clarity. If this falls, do we still get to vote on? Yeah, okay. I wanted to refer it to them.
Okay. So the vote is to not refer it to the protocol committee. So now we will proceed to take council.
Lord Mayor Kamaleska, can I just seek a clarification from the proposer, the amender? In the report, there's two scenarios. One, where members wish to revoke. Scenario two is when a request comes in. Is it in both situations that we'd have to have a 2/3 vote to rescind?
That's that's a question.
Does the proposer want to answer that question?
Yes, in every situation, unless he or she requests removal, that's not included, because that can be taken by an ordinary vote where a person requests removal, or otherwise by majority of 2/3 of the members of Dublin City Council.
Is that clear now?
So,
okay, as I understand it, Councillor Malooly, what you're saying is that if person A requests to be removed from the freedom of the city, that request can be granted by simple majority. Hang on, please. I'm asking the question of the proposer.
Yes.
In terms of the interpretation of this amendment that you're about to vote on.
Yes.
If it's otherwise, and the council wishes to remove the person against their wishes, then you're saying it's then a 2/3 majority.
Yes.
And that's the interpretation of what we're about to vote on. Is that clear? Okay.
Can we proceed then to vote on the amendment by Councillors Malooly, Costello and Heaney? Okay. We're proceeding to vote, Councillor Free. Yeah, we're voting now. So, who? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, there's yes 44, there are no 8, so that vote is carried.
Okay, we now move on to the members. We now move on to the issue of the individuals to be removed or otherwise from the freedom of the city. So I had begun to propose the removal of Aung San Suu Kyi as set out there in scenario 1. So just to elaborate on that, I made this proposal. I asked group leaders a number of months ago, sought agreement to do this on the basis of the horrendous treatment of the Rohingya people in Myanmar, Burma, which has been described by the United Nations as ethnic cleansing and equivalent to genocide. I had done so having met representatives of the Rohingya people and the campaigners, and one of whom is here in the gallery this evening. I'd like to welcome him. And I've since met them on a number of occasions. I'm very strongly in favour of the removal. I don't in any way question the motives of the Council in granting the freedom. I think it was done for the right reasons at that time. But sadly, I think we can only now conclude that Aung San Suu Kyi has been complicit in the horrendous pogroms, ethnic cleansing against the Rohingya people. And that, I think, is very clear at this stage. So I think it would be appropriate that we remove her name from the role of the freedom of the City of Dublin. And this has nothing to do with any personalities who may have flown in and flown out to give their view on this. My focus has been entirely on the Rohingya people and their plight. So I would commend that to members. Now, it was difficult to take names when I was speaking myself, so I'll just indicate if people want to indicate. Okay, Councillor Montague.
Thanks, Ordvera. I was the Lord Mayor who, I suppose, bestowed the freedom of the city, who actually handed it over. I wasn't actually there when it was voted on, but I handed it over that night and that ceremony. And it was a joyous night. It was a very moving night. And I felt when I met Aung San Suu Kyi that I was meeting somebody really important, and that somebody who had campaigned and had sacrificed so much personally for what she believed in. So when this issue came up, it was a difficult decision to think about what we're going to do. And I wanted to believe and want to believe that maybe Aung San Suu Kyi is maybe trapped or doesn't have the power or the influence she should have. But I still think it comes down to this: what's happening in her country is wrong, and whether she has power or not, she should be standing up for the people who are being ethnically persecuted. And she may not have that power. She didn't have the power in the past, but she stood up for her own people. Now she may not have that power, but she should be standing up for the people in her country who are being ethnically cleansed. So it's with a heavy heart that I will be voting to remove the freedom of the city for Aung San Suu Kyi.
Councillor Freehill.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Well, it's extraordinary. The freedom of the city to Aung San Suu Kyi seems to have many authors and many Lord Mayors. However, back in 2000, when I decided that I wanted to give the freedom of the city to U2 because I admired the way they promoted young musicians in Dublin, and also the fact that they paid their taxes in Ireland at that time. And I was very appreciative of that and felt that they deserved to be recognised. And then I was aware of the fact that I couldn't give the freedom of the city to 3 men and not to a woman. And at that time, a few months before that, Martin Lacey, Dermot's brother, who was working with Burma Action, met us to tell us about Aung San Suu Kyi. And I was very impressed about the fact that she had the moral courage and backbone to stand up to the generals of Burma. And it was for that reason that I gave her the freedom of the city. I am terribly disappointed that she has not stood up to the generals now that she actually has power in the city, and that's very unfortunate. I, with a very heavy heart tonight, will have to vote that it be removed from her. But what I think is terribly sad is that I'm not convinced that taking the freedom of the city tonight is going to make much difference to the Rohingya people. And that is the saddest thing of all, and that's what bothers and really concerns me most of all, because they are the people who are suffering. I said that when Bob Geldof came along, and I mean, with great flourish, he handed back the freedom of the city. I said to him, wouldn't it have been much better if, now that he is Sir Geldof, if he had actually used his power to ask the British government to put economic sanctions on Myanmar, and that would have been much more effective, and that would have achieved a hell of a lot more. So in a way, there's an awful lot of grandstanding that I really wonder what it's going to do for the Rohingya people at the end of the day, because that, as far as I'm concerned, is all that matters.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm very brief in this. I'm going to be voting to rescind the the freedom. I was one of the councillors, one of the few councillors in this chamber who actually voted to support in the first place back in 1999. And I was very disappointed when I see what happened. The reason why we gave her at the time was to highlight the human rights issue which was taking place and the role that she was playing in trying to defend those human rights. And I do believe that a lot more could have been done or said now to try and defend human rights still. And the freedom of the city was to reflect the views and the values and the principles of Dublin people. And that's what we did back in 1999. And I believe by rescinding it, we're yet again going to reflect the values and the principles of Dublin people, because I think most Dubliners will be opposed to what's happening over there. And it was, I could be corrected in this, I think a Dublin philosopher, Edmondson, who said, evil will triumph when good men sit back and do nothing. And this is another situation where people saying nothing is helping evil triumph. I would agree with my colleague, Councillor Freehill, where people such as Bob Geldof, and there's more with him as well, could do a lot more to raise the concerns, to raise the issue, to make it more publicly aware. I see we getting inundated with emails about flying flags over City Hall, which is just a symbol, and yet there's people being murdered on a daily basis, and we don't get near the amount of emails, and that kind of concerns me, the values that people do have. But I would again, it was with a heavy heart I do this. I don't think that it's something we should be doing lightly. I don't think the people of Dublin would want this to be done lightly, and this isn't being done, and I think we are reflecting the views and the values of the people of Dublin, which is what we're trying to do in this chamber. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Kennedy.
I will be voting no for reasons that will be outlined by other people, but I just want to apologise to you for questioning a procedural ruling that you made. I was wrong on that, and I shouldn't have questioned the ruling that you made that was correct.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Perry.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I welcome the proposal to remove the honorary award from Aung San Suu Kyi. I'd also like to congratulate Councillor Flynn for convincing Bob Geldof to become involved in the campaign. While I don't believe the freedom of our city is compatible with an honour bestowed from the British monarchy, particularly while Britain continues to occupy the 6 counties, Geldof's intervention, in my opinion, was welcome, and I also welcome U2's intervention. The media coverage of the meeting between Councillor Paul Hand, myself and the representatives of the Rohingya in Ireland last September brought the issue of the genocide of the Rohingya by the Burmese military to public attention in Ireland. Since the initial outcry against Suu Kyi and the Burmese government, the issue has gone quiet, as it appeared that many Irish Liberals didn't like criticism of their poster girl, Suu Kyi. Bob Geldof's appearance reignited debate, and we appear to be in a position now to actually remove the freedom of the city from someone who is certainly complicit in the murder, rape and torture of the Rohingya people, but actually somebody who could possibly support the genocide of a people. I think it's an opportunity to send a message out. It may not have huge practical effects, but it certainly will be covered worldwide and put further pressure on the Burmese government. Ironically, the Rohingya in Ireland celebrated the honour bestowed on Suu Kyi back in that day, when she was presented with the prize, and also presented her with a gift on the night. So it's extremely ironic that now she is turned on them after all the support they had offered her. So you can see from the cynicism I have here as to why I would be suspicious of the motion at this late stage of the night, or the amendment being put by Fianna Fáil. Good.
Councillor McCartan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a complex narrative dominated by ethnic rivalries. This is a country manipulated over decades by the military. Aung San Suu Kyi is the de facto leader of a civilian government with very limited power, with a constitution written by the military junta. And there is no doubt the hatred of the Rohingya people unites Myanmar. A definition of genocide, which she may be all that stands between the Rohingya people and all-out genocide. I have examined the definition. I think it's important that it's put on the record. Acts intended to destroy a national, ethnic, racial or religious group in whole or in part. I've seen her then described as a war criminal and a murderer, which reminded me to read something I had seen many years ago, a judgment after the Second World War at Nuremberg, where the systematic extermination of Jews by the Nazis and those guilty were held to account. And the wording of the judge in his summing up at the end of that tribunal, when he stated, "A country is what it stands for, when standing for something is the most difficult." And the judge concluded, when passing his guilty verdict, "This is what we stand for: justice, truth, and the value of a single human being." And we as councillors now have to make up our minds tonight where we stand. I stand for rescinding this award. Thank you.
Thanks,
Ardvara. Well, I have to say, I want to start by saying that I'm delighted that the Protocol Committee did come up with a method to rescind this, because when I first tabled my motion in the Area Committee in September, at the time management advised that there wasn't any mechanism to rescind it. So I think it's a good thing now that, and I want to just say that to commend the Protocol Committee and yourself, Ardvara, for taking that initiative so that we can have this discussion tonight. And I want to obviously agree with everything that's been said. I mean, I think that through her silence, Aung San Suu Kyi is complicit in crimes against humanity. There's no doubt that the treatment of the Rohingya people is repugnant and grotesque, and it is. All of the accounts of these acts are upheld by organisations such as the United Nations and Amnesty International. It's interesting that she said in her Nobel lecture when she was receiving that award that wherever suffering is ignored, there will be the seeds of conflict, for suffering degrades, embitters and enrages. And she also said, "Fear of losing power corrupts those who wield it, and fear of the scourge of power corrupts those who are subject to it." And she is absolutely ignoring the suffering of the Rohingya, and instead of, she's using their suffering against them, quite frankly. She's denying others the rights to freedom that she claimed for herself, and worse, she may be complicit in crimes against humanity and in possibly also in genocide. And we in Dublin are a humane city, so we cannot celebrate or honour someone who turns such a blind eye to violence and turns her back on the suffering of people that she also experienced very similar suffering herself when she was imprisoned and denied her democratic rights. So I absolutely, as I had proposed in my motion last September, will be voting to rescind it. And I just want to say, to comment, I mean, I tend to agree with Councillor Perry on Geldof's intervention, but I just, on the question of you know, taking advice from people who don't pay tax. I have a bit of a problem with that, but particularly in the case of you two, who you know, hang out with the likes of Bush and Blair, who may also be complicit in crimes against humanity. So I think, in particular, in relation to you two, that they might want to take a long, hard look at what happens to societies when the wealthy and corporations don't pay their taxes. I mean, there's research has been done by the I can't remember the name of the organisation now, but I think it's Tax Justice International, who said that if you were to tax the wealth, the almost $32 trillion are in offshore accounts, that you would be able to end world poverty for 100 years, which is essentially ending world poverty. So I think that Bono in particular needs to take a long, hard look at his own track record by not paying his taxes in the suffering that he causes, and paying attention to his own affairs so he doesn't end up in another mistaken way in other papers like the Paradise Papers. And just very quickly to address the issue that Councillor Freehill was, I think it's a very important act. I know from being in Palestine that these acts of solidarity matter.
Sorry, Councillor, you're way over time.
I know I'm finishing on this, and I just hope that it actually reaches the Rohingya people, and that they can take some solace that some people somewhere in the world haven't forgotten about them and stand in solidarity with them.
Councillor Ryan.
Thanks very much. I won't repeat what those rescinding the motion have said already, but I wanted to add my own personal experience of the issue. I worked on the issue of Myanmar and human rights in Myanmar with Trócaire for a number of years, and I just want to commend the work of Trócaire on Myanmar because in many ways they were attempting to speak about these issues for years before it was really popular or possible to speak about the issue of ethnic minorities in Myanmar. In fact, they insisted on calling the country Myanmar at a time when organisations like the Burma Solidarity Group and Burma Action insisted on calling the country Burma, when Burmese is a majority ethnicity within a country of over 150 ethnicities. And for decades, Kachin, the Karen, the Shan and the Rohingya have been calling for Burma to not be the name of the country. And I noticed actually coming up the stairs that Trócaire have a screening of their Christmas ad coming out of City Hall tonight, so I thought that was quite nice. But for me, the point to be taken from all that is that listening to the hero is not always the best way for us to understand what's happening within a country. Certainly Aung San Suu Kyi's actions in recent years have made it much clearer what the problem of her leadership is in relation to ethnic minorities, but there were many millions of ethnic minorities who for decades were trying to get the international community to understand that there was more than one voice outside the junta in Burma, in Myanmar, attempting to communicate their version of what human rights in Myanmar means. And I have to say, the whole thing for me really just makes me quite uncomfortable with the whole idea of the freedom of the city, because it's not going to be the first or the last time that we realise that somebody we hold up as a hero in fact isn't so perfect after all. And I will be voting to rescind it, but I don't imagine that the people we put forward in years to come will be perfect either. Thanks.
Councillor Hand.
Thank you very much, Ardvera. And as Councillor Perry mentioned, I met the Rohingya community in Ireland some months ago. In fact, we were speaking about putting a proposal like this for at least 12 to 18 months, if not longer, because of what's happening in Rakhine State for the past 35 years is actually apartheid, and what's been happening over the past 3 to 4 years has basically been a systematic genocide. Regarding Aung San Suu Kyi herself, at best by her silence she is complicit. At worst, she is actively driving the genocide of the Rohingya people in Rakhine State. Although the civilian government in Burma is influenced by the military, it isn't dominated by it as it once was in the past, so she is actively, by being the Prime Minister of the country, supporting the genocide there. And in fact, it's a really messed up situation. There's sectarian conflict. There's someone called the Buddhist Osama bin Laden who's stoking up hysteria and murder, and these things have to be opposed. Also, Aung San Suu Kyi herself questioned whether a CNN reporter was a Muslim in a television interview some months ago, showing her own sectarian bias. Aung San Suu Kyi for a long time was considered a liberal champion, someone in favour of human rights. But what her about turn has shown is that there's a very thin line between liberalism and barbarism. And in fact, I do think we've seen that here tonight, due to by the Liberal parties, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Labour, selectively using rules to give Barack Obama, Freudian slip, apologies, the freedom of the city, and then changing the rules to rescind them from Aung San Suu Kyi. So I won't be lectured by those Liberal parties who have done nothing but harm people. And I think we need to go back to the olden days of where we were part of a non-aligned movement and an anti-imperialist international foreign policy, and that's something that we need to do for human rights and human decency. Thank you, Ardvera.
Councillor Andrews.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I don't think Councillor Freehill should feel guilty. I don't suppose she really knew what was going to happen then. But this is a symbolic gesture, and but I do think symbolism is very important, because the Rohingya people, this is that's who, as you said, Lord Mayor, who our focus should be on. I believe we should remove the freedom of the city, And I think it's important that we send out a gesture of support and solidarity with the Rohingya here in Ireland, but also across the world. So I think I would certainly support the removal of the freedom of the city. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
I think the most important thing is we have to send out a message. Councillor Freehill was saying, like, what good does this do to Rohingya people? It's solidarity. And most of us here who are involved in any kind of struggle knows that solidarity does make a huge difference. And for a city like Dublin to actually rescind the highest honour that we can give you or bestow on you sends out such solidarity. We gave it to her in 1999 for her support. Oh, sorry, I thought it was 1999. Sorry, yeah, sorry, apologies. We gave it to her because she stood up and showed courage in the defence of human rights. We now must rescind that because she no longer is showing that moral courage to actually step in, and more still, she hasn't even tried to condemn the slaughter and the genocide of the Rohingya people. She betrays everything for which we award the freedom of the city. I awarded the freedom of the city on your behalf to Father Mallon when I was Lord Mayor, because he stood for everything that I believed in, and it was something to remember the 1916 rebellion. The other thing is that I just want to commend Michal for actually bringing this to our attention. And we would have done this irrespective of any celebrity stepping in. We had already started this conversation. And it is good when celebrities do come in and support struggles such as this. But I mean, that doesn't mean, I mean, I'd be quite happy if Bob actually stayed off the roll, in my opinion. It wouldn't bother me at all. It wouldn't bother me if Bono stayed off it neither. But I definitely want her removed from the role of honour. Gormaigat.
Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, in 2000, this City Council, not a Lord Mayor, this City Council gave the freedom of the city to Aung San Suu Kyi and you too at the time. It's a democratic decision of the City Council. No individual councillor makes that decision. But we done it at the time in the full realisation that at that time it was the right thing to do. It was to acknowledge the huge work that she had played in the development of a democratic system, or trying to get a democratic system in Burma at the time and Myanmar now. We now know we were incorrect. Quite evidently, we were sold a pig in a poke. I don't know what's happening in that part of the world insofar what's happening on a daily basis in relation to the military, what grip they have on the institutions of government, but it's quite evident that we would have expected somebody who received the highest honour that this city can give to any citizens in the world, that he would act in a manner, I think, befitting of that. And I think there is, I'm open to correction. I've listened to the council here tonight. I think I only hear one councillor so far indicating that they won't be supporting that of the councillors who've spoken so far. But it's quite evident that I think this sullies our city to be connected with this at this present time. And it's quite evident going forward. We have to be very cautious. Nobody knows how people are going to turn out in the future, and when the annals of history are written, maybe people will say that people were undeserving of it. This person is alive now. The small gesture it has with the many cities across Britain who have also removed her from the role of honorary free persons of their city, I think it's the right thing to do here. It's regrettable, but it's the right thing. And when I say regrettable, I don't mean because of who she is, but because it was given at the time for somebody who we thought was making the right steps and the right moves. As I say, whatever has happened over there, I don't know, but history will prove and history will write, I think, disparagingly of her for not making that stand and not following up for what she has done up until she assumed de facto presidential status in Myanmar. And I have to say I have no problem whatsoever in voting to remove her from the Freedom of the City list here tonight in the City Council. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Councillor McGinley.
Sorry, on a point of order, Lord Mayor. I haven't spoken. We've been speaking now for half an hour. I'd like to go on and take the vote, please, if that's possible.
I'd like to speak on it, please.
I just need to speak to the officials for a second, please.
Lord Mayor, I withdraw that. I mean, I want to be nice to the councillors, but on this particular issue...
Okay, we'll proceed. Councillor McGinley. Councillor McGinley, please.
I was here in the year 2000, and clearly we need more sophisticated criteria than an Oxford education for the awarding of the freedom of the City of Dublin. I mean, that's one thing that strikes me very clearly. In relation to Myanmar itself, I'm clear that Aung San Suu Kyi is not running the military, so I think to suggest otherwise is a bit foolhardy. Clearly, the lack of power and the lack of voice that she's given, is a cause for scandal. She does appear to be engaging in some belated action. There has been a papal visit in the last couple of weeks. There also have been visits to the various sites of genocide by Aung San Suu Kyi, which is embarrassing to the local government. But I accept that that's very late in the day for many of the victims of the genocidal activity, but just to note that there are people outside of Dublin City Council actually doing something. It may very well be late in the day. The other thing, Lord Mayor, I think the City Councillors are perfectly capable of acting without prompts from other rock musicians or rock bands, people who have their own issues in the public domain, if we want to get into it, which I don't propose to tonight or Vera. But I'm not comfortable with the fact that the name is remaining, so therefore I'll be supporting the removal, even though I had normal course of events and very reluctant to do that. Thank you.
Councillor Lacey.
Lord Mayor, I've been a member of Burma Action Ireland for the last 20 years, and indeed I was the first councillor to raise the issue of the Rohingya people here, so I've no newfound interest in relation to Burma. And I do respect other people's views, apart from the bizarre liberalism is on the same side as barbarism or whatever the comment Councillor Hand made. I do respect other people's views on this issue, but I profoundly disagree with people on it. Aung San Suu Kyi was given the award for her work to date in democratising Burma. She has made enormous progress in relation to that. Clearly not enough, but Burma is not a functioning democracy. Burma is a country still under the control of the military dictatorship, and Aung San Suu Kyi and the National League for Democracy are walking a really thin line between trying to advance democracy and trying not to set off the generals in terms of them exercising further power. The second reason I'm opposed to the motion is that I do believe it sets a really dangerous precedent for this city. We in this council should always do what is right for Dublin. That should be our fundamental priority objective. What is the right thing to do for this city in a moral way, in an ethical way, in a democratic way, and a way that ensures the best interests of the city. I believe that passing this motion will set off a chain in which people will, for very minor reasons, advance the revocation of the freedom of the city for other people. I believe we should stand by decisions that were taken by previous councils in relation to these matters. We don't have to agree with them all the time. There will be people on the list, I would say, I wonder why they got the awards, but not to revoke it. I think it is not in the best interest of Dublin City to pass this motion. I believe it's the wrong step forward. I believe we should take up the issue of the Rohingya people, but doing it in this manner, in my view, is not right for Dublin and not right for future recipients of Freedom of City Awards. I think it will make people very wary of accepting them in the future, so I will be voting no.
Councillor Brabazon.
I'm voting the opposite way to Councillor Lacey, and I'm doing so because it's simply the right thing to do, not because we've got letters or lobbying from Bob Geldof or Bono or U2 or anybody like that. That's irrelevant. It's simply, on a human rights basis, is the right and the correct thing to do. I feel, however, that when we go home tonight, people may around the council may feel like they're entitled to wash their hands or wash their hands of this particular issue. Whatever solidarity we show by passing this motion is just that, it's solidarity. It's not going to stop one rape if somebody is intent on doing it at the butt end of a gun. It's not going to stop one person being killed. I think that we need to appeal to the authorities in the United Nations to intervene in a much more practical way than simply us passing motions here. Whatever form that might take, I think that would be a matter for our own Department of Foreign Affairs to formulate representations to the United Nations. But I certainly believe passing this motion, whilst it does show solidarity and it's the right thing to do, it's simply not going to save one life or prevent one rape. And the people in higher authority than Dublin City Council need to act, and specifically our own Department of Foreign Affairs and specifically the United Nations Secretary General, and act accordingly. They can't. As an international community, I don't think it's right for us to sit idly by while people are dying.
Councillor O'Murray.
Gormagat Ardvera. Well, it sounds like Ardvera, I'd be one of only two councillors, along with Councillor Lacey, who will be opposing this proposal. And it's kind of along the grounds of what Councillor Brabazon has just outlined, but I have the opposite view of it. While it may feel good to do this, I think tomorrow morning the cause of the Rohingyas will be no further advanced, and in fact we will have detached ourselves from it by doing it, and we will be isolating a leader. I'm not an expert in the region or there by any means, but my sense is we'll be isolating a leader within a country where the military clearly still have a lot of power. Now, as a freeman of this city, I think she has a standing with this City Council, and in return I would expect that members of this City Council has standing with her. So I would strongly prefer that we would send a delegation of 3 councillors from the Protocol Committee to seek a meeting with her, okay, to examine the situation and to report back to this chamber within 2 months. If we do not get that meeting, or there's a refusal to engage with the City Council, I would be perfectly happy to proceed, but I don't feel we have done that, so I won't be supporting the proposal on that basis. Thank you.
Councillor McAuliffe.
Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Sorry, one voice, please.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I suppose often I would get criticisms about this council that when we deal with these kind of international relations, we should be dealing with the core issues of the city. But I think the reason we granted the freedom of the city is to align ourselves with the values, with our values, with other people, and therefore when those people differ from our values, we need to respond to it. We can't just sit by. As I said, I intend to vote to remove Aung San Suu Kyi. I don't have any personal first-hand knowledge of what involvement she has, but I know people who get the freedom of the city do it often because they take courageous action. They often go against convention, and as Councillor Montague says, they don't just do it on their own power but on their influence. And it's very, very clear that Aung San Suu Kyi has not used her influence or whatever minimal level of power she has to protect the Rohingya people. That is not my view. That is the view of the UN Secretary General, who clearly said in September that she had a chance, perhaps a last chance, and that's a direct quote. Well, if that was her last chance in September, I have seen nothing to say that she has done anything to protect the Rohingya people. And for that reason alone, rather than her involvement in any genocide, I believe she is no longer fit to be a free person of Dublin. Councillor Murray suggests that we should meet her. Of course, she had an ample opportunity to meet us when we awarded her the freedom of the city. I wasn't a councillor here when the decision was made, but I was when it was granted. And I clearly remember us being of little relevance to Aung San Suu Kyi. The councillors were not permitted to meet her. There was no engagement between us. And perhaps at that point we should have known that things had gone awry. So I would see little point in us sending a delegation when it was clear that when she came to visit Dublin in the farah that was around that, she hadn't the decency to thank or to shake hands with those people who did meet her. So I would have no hope that she would change her mind, and I think this is a positive move for the city.
Councillor McAdam.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, Aung San Suu Kyi rightly was rewarded the freedom of the city in 2000. She shared many of the values of Dubliners, or so Councillor Freehill and the elected members at the time thought. And to remove the freedom of the city is an unprecedented and, as I said earlier, extraordinary step. But it is the right step to take, and I will vote to remove the freedom of the city for a number of reasons. Why? Because she has turned a blind eye to the atrocities being inflicted upon the Rohingya people. But in her words as well, she has described what the UN has classified as a textbook example of genocide as fake news. She has described the sexual violence being inflicted upon the Rohingya women as fake rape. How in the honour of God can we allow someone like this, someone who has stood idly by, someone by her comments, to retain the highest honour, the freedom of the city, the highest honour that our people and our city can bestow on an individual? On that basis, Lord Mayor, I urge this Council to remove the freedom of the city and Aung San Suu Kyi. Thank you.
Margaret, Councillor Heaney.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I'll be in the minority myself this evening when it comes to taking a vote on this issue, but I'd like to take up a very good point raised by Councillor Perry around the fact that following his discussion with the Rohingya people, and indeed I think Councillor Hand and others mentioned, highlighted the violation of human rights against the Rohingya people. And I propose that we adjourn taking a decision on removing the bestowing of the freedom of the city on Aung San Suu Kyi for 6 months or there, because as I think Councillor McGinley mentioned, there seems to be some movement on matters affecting Myanmar, and it will keep the issue on the agenda. But also, Lord Mayor, there is a report awaited on the situation from the UN fact-finding investigation into violence in the region, the head of which investigation has himself, Ard Mhair, sought an extension to September 2018 from the UN Human Rights Commission to continue that investigation. And Lord Mayor, as I think Councillor Dermot Lacey referred to, the fact that the Lord Mayor of the day obviously had her very good reasons to propose the bestowing of the freedom of the city on Aung San Suu Kyi. And if anything at all good is to come out of this, it will focus our minds on the future, on who exactly and how often we in this City Council bestow such an honour on any individual. And Ard Mhair, I know that there have been people who have been fighting the cause of the Rohingya people for many, years, including members in this City Council chamber. But if we take this decision here this evening to delete her name from the roll, I believe we are allowing rock stars and former rock stars to dictate the business of this chamber. And furthermore, Lord Mayor, I don't believe by removing the freedom of the city from this individual this evening is going to do anything to stop the pain and suffering being endured by the Rohingya people. I will not be voting in favour of removing the freedom of the city from this individual this evening. Thank you.
Margaret. Okay, I had another speaker, but he's absent from the chamber, Councillor Flynn. He's not here. Okay. So we put the matter to the vote.
Ard Mhair, it's yes to rescind, yeah?
The vote on that is yes 49, no 2, so the abstention 1. So that vote is carried.